Hi, Acadiana. I'm Meteorologist Dave Baker with the latest update on Hurricane Milton. Milton becoming a hurricane earlier today, upgraded from a tropical storm, and yesterday morning it was just a tropical depression. So we're seeing some rapid intensification here, and a big hurricane is going to be heading toward the west coast of Florida. The coordinates there on the left-hand side of your screen as of the 4 o'clock advisory on Sunday afternoon. And you can see on the satellite imagery that Hurricane Milton is gaining its strength. It's in a very good environment atmospherically when it comes to strengthening. There is a bit of a trough off toward the north that's been pushing it a little bit south of due east, but it's resumed more of an eastward movement here, and another trough is going to be digging across the North American continent, and that's going to help to pull this off toward the north. There is an indication this is going to continue to go through some rapid intensification here over the next day or two, and there are several models that are bringing this to a Category 4 or Category 5 strength as it passes just to the northeast of the Yucatan Peninsula. So the right environmental conditions are there. There's the latest cone, and it has been shifted just a little bit farther toward the south, but you can see that the darker shaded cone that now encroaches on the western coast of Florida is still indicating a major hurricane. The National Hurricane Center going with a Category 4, a strong Category 4 for a while as it passes there north of the Yucatan. And then a little bit of weakening right before it makes landfall, possibly getting it back down to a Category 3. And I'll explain some of the reasoning in that coming up in just a little bit. But there are the current forecast track models. And also, if you look up there, there is still a bit of a spread, but it does fall kind of within where the range is of the National Hurricane Forecast cone is. But remember, the National Hurricane Center's forecast cone isn't based on a lot of the computer models. It's the widening of that, or the width of that cone is based on the margin of error based over the last 5 years. So that 72-hour forecast that you're seeing there right before it makes landfall, that cone is about 100 miles wide. So it can go outside of that cone. About 2/3 of all of the systems stay within the cone. But you can see that the model forecast guidance there is pretty much right there within that cone, and they're all very well clustered with a bit of a trough pulling this off toward the east. A little bit more of a northeasterly turn there toward the last 24 hours and heading toward the west central coast of Florida. Look at some of the intensity models, though. You can see that there are several of them here that go into Category 5, and many of them are in Category 4. The official forecast from the National Hurricane Center goes Category 4 as well, but this is at 48 hours. You see there down at the bottom. Remember, landfall isn't forecast until 72, and you can see there's a bit of a drop in the intensity there as you get between 60 and 72 hours, and there's a few things that are possibly going to be going on here as we go into the forecast period. So water temperatures is one of the things that we're kind of looking at. They are very warm in the forecast track, so even as you get over toward the Yucatan Peninsula, these water temperatures are really, really warm, and that's why we're thinking there's going to be some serious intensification there. And the tropical cyclone heat potential, even though this has not been updated for a few days, it is very high here over the south central part of the Gulf of Mexico here near the Yucatan Peninsula, and then there's a little bit of a drop in that here as you get closer to the Florida coast, and some of that may have to do with the recent passing of Hurricane Helene, and then there's also that tremendous amount of freshwater rainfall that is pulling into the northeastern part of the Gulf of Mexico. So could it possibly experience a little bit of Lily effect that we saw a little over 20 years ago, where Hurricane Lily was coming up closer to Louisiana, but it made its way up to a Category 4 hurricane with winds at 145 and then did some weakening. Now, do I think it's going to weaken as much as Hurricane Lily did? That doesn't look too likely, but between now and the next couple of days, you can see that the wind shear is going to be relatively low here going into the next 24 to 48 hours. But then as you look at day 3, and this is for Wednesday, you can see that bit of a trough is starting to dig a little bit more here across the upper Gulf Coast. So it could encounter some wind shear, and also with that water temperature maybe dropping a little bit, it may have some inhibitions there, may run into some inhibiting factors there right before it makes landfall. But all of the major forecast models are showing a Category 3 at the very least when it comes to a landfall. So let's go with the GFS, and the GFS is running a little bit farther north than the official forecast track, and because of that, I think because of this earlier model run, it was still thinking that Milton was in a more northerly position initially, like right now. But the hurricane reconnaissance aircraft are finding a center that's a little bit farther toward the south. So the National Hurricane Center's extended forecast also pushes a little bit farther to the south. But the GFS runs Category 2, Category 3. At peak strengthening, and then is still a Category 2 as it makes landfall. Now the Euro is running much farther toward the south, but again, we haven't gotten a new run on this. This is kind of based on some earlier information, but it has a little bit more interaction with the Yucatan Peninsula, which is a possibility, and then also wind shear having an effect on it farther down the road. But the Euro really doesn't get much higher than tropical storm in the extended forecast. But do remember, this is an older model. We're still kind of waiting for some new runs to come down on the Euro at this time. The HWRF is very similar to what we're seeing with the National Hurricane Center's forecast, bringing it to a Cat 4 with those winds getting up to about 142 miles per hour when you convert it from knots there. And if you look in the top right-hand corner of your screen, you can see where it shows the maximum winds and the minimum sea level pressure here right there off the top. So you kind of follow along on that. It goes up in the 123 range on knots, which is in the 145 range when it comes to miles per hour. And the HAFS model is the strongest of them all, and it takes it up to a Category 5 briefly here as it moves north of the Yucatan Peninsula, and you'll see the max winds on here getting up to 158 knots, which is 170 miles per hour. So the HAFS model is forecasting a Category 5 just as it passes north of the Yucatan Peninsula and then weakens a little bit as it starts to make landfall, but you're still talking about the possibility of a Category 3 hurricane making landfall somewhere right to the north of Tampa Bay. But I'll tell you, some of the models that I've seen go anywhere from Cedar Key all the way down to Fort Myers, so it's still a pretty wide range. So we've got a number of webcams that I've got pulled up here. This is from Clearwater Beach, and again, the camera shot here changes about every 10 seconds or so. You got a little shot there of the beach. You can see there's some breezy conditions that are going on right there right now, and it occasionally will kind of zip its way over to where it looks like a shopping area, and traffic doesn't look to be quite as busy right now, but I'll tell you, a few hours ago, there were a lot of folks who were on the roadway. And this is from St. Petersburg, Florida. These are areas that could possibly see some really significant storm surge. They are getting some scattered rains out there along the western coast of Florida, and then farther down to the south, this is Fort Myers. Again, these are all areas that got hit pretty hard with storm surge with Hurricane Helene, and now they're looking at the possibility of more of a direct hit, but also everything generally south of the center of circulation is going to be dealing with some significant storm surge. So there's a large population that lives in the western part of Florida, and a lot of people are probably going to be on the move over the next couple of days. Of course, I'll have more on this coming up a little bit later on this week as we follow Hurricane Milton as it makes its journey toward the western coast of Florida. But before I let you go, I wanted to show you something that's quite interesting. We have 3 ongoing hurricanes in the Atlantic Basin right now, And if my math is correct, and from what I've seen from other forecasters, I believe this is the only time we've had 3 named hurricanes in the Atlantic Basin at the same time during the month of October, at least this period of October. So something quite interesting out there as you see that there are 3 named hurricanes currently spinning in the open waters of the Atlantic or the Gulf of Mexico, what we call the Atlantic Basin. I don't believe we've ever seen this during the month of October, at least for this week in the month of October. Well, I hope you enjoy Let's Talk Tropics. Of course, I'm going to have updates on my social media pages. They're listed right there. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel, because into next week, not only do I have Acadiana weather today, which is a local forecast here for Acadiana at 7:30, about 7:30 each weekday morning, but Let's Talk Tropics is also live each weekday afternoon at noon, and of course we'll be in real-time forecasting for Hurricane Milton here over the next couple of days. I'm Meteorologist Dave Baker. I hope you enjoy the rest of your Sunday afternoon and Sunday evening, and I will see you Monday morning. Have a great afternoon.